Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for coming out to the City of Georgetown swearing in. At this time, I want to let you all know that during the swearing in process, please feel free to step forward and take photos of your family members. We're fine with that. You'll be able to stand right here. I'm going to ask Blake Harris, Brendan Gayhart, and Reagan Prather to come forward and lead us in the pledge. If everyone would please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you guys for doing it. And if we could just take a moment for a moment of silence. Appreciate that. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to introduce Ruby West. She will come forward, please, and she'll be singing a solo. She's a friend of Tom Prather's, and she also works over in the Lesbie's office.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. Yes, let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow to take each moment and live each moment with peace eternally. Let there be peace on this earth, and let it begin with me.
Thank you, Ruby, very much. And at this time, we have a neighbor from the South that would like to come and speak to us just a little bit about liberty. Henry Clay.
I know there will be some folks who will say that the reason I'm here today is because I did not do very well in Scott County in the last election of 1844. The only reason I'm here is to try to get a few more votes in case I happen to run for president again. But I think some of you know that as a young lawyer came out here in Lexington to start my law practice in 1790s, one of my first clients was a fellow that I think you all know real well named Elijah Craig. Now there's an interesting fellow. But actually, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to come and celebrate this day. I find that anyone who decides to become a public servant needs all the support and help that he can get. Amen. My father would have said. My father, of course, was a Baptist preacher, and I think one of the reasons why I do feel like I have a connection to Georgetown is because my father, just like Elijah Craig and Lewis Craig, was actually thrown in jail for preaching without a license. Now, I have no memory of my father. My father died when I was only about 4 years old, so I have no memories of father. But my mother, as I would grow up back in Hanover County, Virginia, my mother would tell me stories about my father as a Baptist preacher, but of course also as a farmer. My father was a tobacco farmer, and my mother would quickly add a successful tobacco farmer. But I think the one story, actually, I have no memory of my father. My father died when I was just 4 years old, and actually my earliest childhood memory was the day after my father's funeral, because that was the day that Colonel Tarleton's British troops invaded our farm. Now, I tell people, of course, that I'm a child of the War of Independence, because I was born in 1777. The war was still going on. And back in those days, back in Hanover County, in that area of Virginia, if people knew that Colonel Tarleton's British troops are nearby, well, you better hide your valuables. Because Colonel Tarleton's British troops, they had a reputation of either stealing everything, or destroying everything, or killing everything. And so and I came from a small little community called the Slashes in Hanover County. And if you knew or heard that Colonel Tarleton's British troops were close by, you would spread the word. And what people would do is they would go off to the side of the house, and they would dig a fake grave. And in that fake grave, that's where they would hide all their valuables. And so that's where you put your silver. That's where you put your money. That's where you put your rifles. Now, the British weren't stupid. They very quickly realized that everywhere they went, there was a fresh grave off to the side of the house. And so the British, they started digging up those fresh graves, looking for buried treasure. And, of course, sometimes they did find buried treasure. That's why they called them treasure graves. Well, the day after my father's funeral, they buried my father just off to the side of the house. My mother let me go out and play in the farmyard. Now, I can't remember my older brother being with me, so I think I was out in the farmyard playing by myself. And all of a sudden, I heard the sound of horses coming, and when I turned around, here came Colonel Tarleton's British troops, and they were riding right towards me. Now, I should have run back to the house for safety, but I was so scared, I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. I stood there absolutely frozen in fear as they came riding closer and closer to me, and I thought for sure they were going to ride right over me. But then they began to spread out. And as they began to spread out across our farm, I watched them as they took their sabers and they went after our farm animals. So I stood there and I watched them as they killed our sheep. They killed our pigs. They went after our cattle. Now my mother was inside the house, and when she heard all of this commotion, probably those poor animals as they died, my mother came running outside and she started yelling for me to come inside the house. But I was so scared because I thought they were going to kill me next. I could not move. And so my mother came out in the middle of all these soldiers. And I remember how she picked me up and she held me tight in her arms. She ran back to the front door and she put me down. And out of the corner of her eye, she saw this one British soldier who was looking at my father's fresh grave off to the side of the house. And she and I watched him as he took his sword. And he was looking at my father's grave, and he decided this must be a treasure grave. And I watched him. He pulled his sword back like this, and he plunged into my father's grave, and my mother yelled at him to stop. But he ignored my mother. He started digging up my father's grave. My mother ran over to make him stop, but he shoved my mother down. He said, "I'm looking for buried treasure." And he went back to digging up my father's grave. And my mother didn't want me to watch this, but it was too late. I never forgot it. But she pushed me through the front door of our home, and then she tried to close the door behind us, but the soldiers were right there, and they pushed the door open. So my mother took me and my two brothers into the corner of the room to protect us. But now the British were inside our home. Now the British began to steal everything of value. They stole my mother's silver, my father's rifle. One soldier ran up the stairs to the second floor of our home, and when he came back downstairs, he had my mother's white satin wedding dress. And he was waving it over his head like this. And I can remember as he went out the front door, I could hear him yell that he had himself a prize. And of course, Mother never saw her wedding dress again. But it must have been about that time that Colonel Tarleton must have come riding up, yelling to his soldiers outside to cease! Cease! And got quiet outside. The soldiers that were still inside our home after they had stolen everything they wanted, destroyed everything they wanted, they started breaking up my mother's furniture and throwing it to the fireplace. So it was a huge fire in the fireplace. Finally, Colonel Tarleton himself stood in the doorway of our home. I'll never forget the sound of his boots as he walked across our wooden floors into our home. And as he walked in and he looked at all the damage, he turned to his soldiers and he said, "Out! Out!" And boy, out the door they ran. And he started out after him, but he stopped. He turned to my mother and he said, "I apologize for the damage done by my men." I'm hiding behind my mother. I'm 4 years old. I'm hiding behind my mother, and I looked up at my mother's face and I saw a look on my mother's face I had never seen before. My mother looked at Colonel Tarleton with absolute hate in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. Colonel Tarleton started to leave. He reached into his pocket and he pulled out a handful of gold and silver coins and he stacked them up on our dining room table. And he turned to my mother and he said, "That should take care of the damage done by my men." And he looked at my mother like he expected my mother to say thank you for the gold and silver. And I looked up at my mother's face and I saw that it was not going to be a thank you from my mother. She glared at Colonel Tarleton with absolute hate in her eyes. She didn't say anything. Well, finally, Colonel Tarleton turned on his heel and out the door he went. And it was quiet in the house after that. I was 4 years old. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And I remember how Mother walked around our home, looking at all the damage. They had completely destroyed our home. I remember how she walked over to the table where Colonel Tarleton had left the gold and silver coins. She scooped them up in both hands and cradled them like it was precious. And she looked at that gold and silver, and then she looked at me. And she gave me one of those looks we parents give our children when we want our children to pay attention, and I knew that look. So I nodded my head, "Yes, ma'am." My mother took a couple of steps closer to the fireplace. There's a huge fire in the fireplace, all the things that they had destroyed. She looked at the fire. She must have been thinking to herself, "What am I going to do? Husband gone, farm destroyed, home destroyed, and children without a father." Then my mother took one step closer to the fire. And with that gold and silver, she threw the coins into the fireplace. When she stepped back, she gave me another look. One of those parent, "Do you understand?" looks. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." Because I think I understood the lesson my mother just taught me. It's a lesson I will never forget as long as I live. When Colonel Tarleton and the British troops invaded our farm, destroyed our farm, killed our animals, and invaded our home and destroyed our home, it wasn't the destruction that made my mother so angry. I think what made my mother so angry was because they took away our freedom. They took away our liberty. They took away our future. 40-odd years. 40-odd years now. I've had the honor and pleasure to represent the great people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So I'm here to celebrate and say thank you for supporting me all those years. I know that I can count on all of you to support this gentleman as he embarks on this great adventure. and he will do his absolute best. My wife Lucretia pointed out to me that I once said something that might be appropriate for this occasion. And evidently, at one point I said, government is a trust, and the officers of the government are trustees. And both the trust and the trustees are created for the benefit of the people. I've never forgotten that. I'm proud to be here today to pass on that quote to this gentleman, and I thank you for your support. And I promised my wife Lucretia that I would not run for president again. But certainly, if a few of my friends in Scott County got together and decided it might be time for one more try. Amen? Amen. Thank you all very much.
At this time, Rob Johnson will come forward and just speak a little bit about the oath that he is going to be officiating for our elected officials.
Good afternoon. First of all, I appreciate Mayor Prather asking me to come here and go ahead and administer the oath to each of the city officials. It's a big honor for me because, as some of you all know, it's been a long time ago, it seems like, but as some of you all know, I was also on the city council, elected for 2 terms. I was on for about close to two and a half years. And so, like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. Having been on the city council, I have a little bit of information about what it's like to be on the council and some of the decisions that you all will be making. And quite honestly, that's part of the reason that we do this oath. Because as one of the parts of the oath is upholding the Constitution of both the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And as Interclaim just indicated, those constitutions were written for the people to protect their rights. And so the oath is a promise as elected officials that we make to the people who represent it, we've been elected to represent, that we're going to faithfully do our duties and whatever that entails in the duties that we have. And so I do appreciate, again, Mayor Prather having this be such a good occasion, because it is important that the people in the community know how important it is to us to make sure that we are going to do what we're supposed to in upholding that oath. At this time, it's my understanding we're going to go ahead and swear in the city council members first. So if each of you all will go ahead and stand up, what I'm going to do.
I'm going to get you to take this.
Sure. Put them one at a time.
No, it'll be all together, but I'll just let her.
Okay, sure, absolutely.
All right, and at this time, we're going to ask that the city council elect members would Chuck Bradley, Molly Butcher Conway, Holly Singer Erdley, David Lesby, Karen Tingle Sames, Mark Showalter, Connie Tackett, and Marvin Thompson. And again, please feel free to come take pictures of your family members as they're sworn in.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the oath. And before I do that, I'm going to ask each of you to go ahead and raise your right hands. And after I read this oath, you indicate that you will. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue as citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute, to the best of my ability, the office of Georgetown City Council Member according to law. And do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of the state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within the state nor out of it, nor have I sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God.
I will.
Thank you all. Congratulations.
I'll just hand that to you.
Well, there we go. Sorry.
Karen messed up.
Leave it to me.
I'm sorry. Congratulations.
While they are taking their seats, I'll go ahead and Judge Johnson will now swear in the city clerk, Tracy Hoffman.
Raise your right hand, please. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of Georgetown City Clerk according to law. And I do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within the state nor out of it, nor have I sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God. Congratulations.
Now we will ask City Attorney Andrew Hartley to come forward and be sworn in.
Raise your right hand, please. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue to be a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of Georgetown City Attorney according to law. And I do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within the state nor out of it, nor have I accepted or sent a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God. Well, congratulations.
And now it is with great honor that I ask our Mayor-elect Tom Prather to come forward and be sworn in.
I've got some helpers coming with me. Come on in, buddy.
If you'll raise your right hand, please. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of Georgetown Mayor according to law. I do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within the state nor out of it, nor have I sent a challenge or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God. Congratulations.
Just, we We've been here longer than we thought, and some folks have been standing for a long time. I don't want to take very long, but just a couple of very brief comments for you all today. First, to thank you for being here. This day is symbolically very important to our form of government. And it just delights me to see an overflow crowd to do it. On the election on November the 4th, I won by this huge majority. It was 21 votes for anyone that wasn't counting. And I mention that just for a couple of reasons. My friends now call me Landslide. My wife Maureen prefers to call me Blackjack. So there are lots of fallout from winning by 21 votes. But I reference that mainly to say to you that winning an election that close is a very humbling experience. And that experience has humbled me. But I want to make it very clear that it's my intention to be the mayor for all of Georgetown. We may have had a very close race, but we want to do the right thing for all of Georgetown. So I just wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention that because the campaign is over and the election is over. And now we are all faced with the responsibility of governing, which was the point of this whole exercise anyway. And while sometimes politics can be a little sketchy and hard to tolerate, it's my fundamental belief that the act of governing is honorable, and that for people of good intent who want to serve the citizens of this community, governing is an honorable act. As Mr. Clay has pointed out to us, we've been given the privilege of the public trust. And what an amazing gift that our community citizens have provided to each one of us. The opportunity to lead one of Kentucky's most important and dynamic cities. We also have the associated responsibility to do our work in the best way we can and to work together with all of our many backgrounds and our many ideas to put those together in the most productive way and move us forward. I'll commit to the City Council that we'll work together. We won't always agree, but we'll do our best when we don't agree to disagree agreeably and to make sure that we respect what Mr. Clay referred to as the public trust. And I'm sure that we're going to do that. I'll close with that. Can't wait to get started with all of you. There's a lot of work to be done, and I couldn't be more excited about where we stand as a community and as a council ready to serve. So Andrea, if you could introduce our final guest today, we can close our program. A very important point, when we put this program together, we wanted it to reflect many things. Not the least of which is our core belief in education and the fact that for us to have a completely successful community, our youth and our education have to be at the front of many things that we do. So it's so appropriate that Andrea is now going to introduce the group that she is. Thank you.
We're going to introduce a quartet from Scott County High School. So I would like to bring before you Addie Preston, Becca Knight, Samuel Miranda, and Dalton Bailey.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. arms brought stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you all again for coming out. That does conclude our program. We have some refreshments out front, so please partake. And then if you want to get any pictures or anything after, please feel free. Thank you, guys.
See you.